Hello, everyone. This is September 24th, 2020. It is 5:01 p.m. and this is the Master Plan Implementation Committee. Before we begin, I'm going to read a statement that we need to read prior to starting the meeting. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL Chapter 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 99 or Verizon Channel 28 or online at www.northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. If the public would like to participate in public hearings, please email your question/comment prior to or during the meeting to ashapiro@northandoverma.gov. That's spelled ASHAPIRO@northandoverma.gov. The question/comment will be read during the proceedings and responded to accordingly. So with that, given that we have no one else has taken on an officer role yet, I will call the meeting to order. And I will ask that we, before we actually get started, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping items, actually, if it's okay with everyone. Number one, we do have a 6 p.m. meeting tonight, so that's in an hour. That is a listening session for the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission's active transportation plan. I just wanted to make everyone aware that that meeting's happening and that some people in this committee might be interested in attending that. So I'm happy to move things along as quickly as possible to see if we can wrap things in an hour, but by no means am I trying to limit us to an hour if that's not what folks want to do. So, but I just want to make folks know. And then, Jean, are you going to break off for that meeting?
Yes, I will.
At 6? Okay. So with that, what I'm going to do right now is I will, for everyone's, just to provide the information to everyone, I'm going to send through the chat function the details on that meeting. So it just gives you a link to the GoToMeeting link, the remote meeting participation link, and the dial in. If you are interested, whether you leave for the meeting at 6 or decide after we wrap a little later to jump into that meeting, it's up to you. And then the second housekeeping item I just really wanted to clear was I just want to introduce the town's new staff planner, Dan Beckley, who you might see on the screen here. He started with us this week. He comes to us from UMass Amherst. He has 2 master's degrees, one in regional planning, another in public policy. And while there, he was a teaching assistant, and he's had a fair bit of internship-based municipal experience. So he's worked, I think, both in Foxborough, where he's done projects for the town of Boxborough. So he likes his Oxboroughs. And he's going to be, his main charge in his position is really going to be project implementation and project management. So I think he's going to be very involved in sort of looking through our master plan, working with you all as a committee, and of course working internally for the town to implement a lot of the strategies that we're going to be discussing, whether it be by pursuing grants and then or working with various committees and departments on advancing project priorities and moving them forward. So really happy to have Dan on board to work with us, and can't wait till you guys get to know him a little better.
Welcome, Dan.
Yeah,
Welcome, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, thank you.
So with that, I'll jump right into the agenda. So the first thing I had on there was approval of minutes from the 8/20/2020 meeting. Did folks have a chance to look those over? Do you want me to share my screen and scroll through it real quickly, or did folks already have a chance to read it?
Looked at it.
Yeah.
Okay. I know.
I'm good. I'd move to accept the minutes from our August 20, 2020 meeting.
I'll second that.
Great. And I'm going to ask, we have to do all votes by roll call. So I'll just call folks out. And if you want to just give me a yes or a no, that would be the best way to do this. So we'll start with Stan.
Yes.
Chris, since I'm saying he's on the committee.
Yeah, he is. I was wrong.
Kelly.
Yes. Am I muted?
George?
Yes.
Yep. John.
Yes.
James. Jay.
Yes.
And Meredith. I see a yes, but you are on mute, Meredith. Just a heads up. If you hover to the bottom of your screen, or where the inside your you'll see some items pop up when you there you go.
Yes, sorry about that.
No problem.
I spent too much
Holly?
time on Zoom.
Holly.
Yes.
All right, great. So we have a unanimous vote to approve our last meeting's minutes. And we'll move swiftly to election of officers. That's something that we had discussed briefly last time, and we wanted to give an opportunity for folks to have expressed some interest, and I did hear some interest. We wanted to have a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary.
Are we open for nominations, Andrew?
Yeah, let's go ahead and just do that.
I'd like to nominate Kelly Cormier as the chair of the implementation committee.
I'll
Great.
second that.
I assume she expressed interest. Is that a correct assumption?
She did express interest. Yes, she's not
Yes.
getting the involuntary shove in the back or anything like that. I think.
What?
Yeah.
What? You mean we can't arm twist her into the job?
It's on video. Watch out.
Yeah.
But who seconded that?
Right.
Who seconded that?
I did. Jay.
Jay.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Great. So let's do another roll call vote then for voting Kelly Cormier as chair of the committee. Stan.
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Good. That's always good.
Yeah, go ahead.
George.
Say no. We dare you.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
John.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Meredith.
Yes.
Holly.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. That's a unanimous vote.
Congratulations, Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll see how that works out, right?
I'm sure it's going to work out great. I'm sure it's going to work.
Yeah.
So do we have any nominations for a vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Stan for vice chair.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, great.
Okay, second by Jay.
Is this a feud?
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I
George?
just wondered if this was a feud. Is this,
Oh, yeah,
is this
yeah.
Kelly extracting revenge?
They're going to be mutually dependent on each other now. So
There you go.
There you go. There you
We'll
go.
make nice.
okay, we'll do another roll call vote. This is going smoothly so far. Stan,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Uh-oh.
John,
Yeah.
Jay,
Yes.
Meredith,
Yes.
and Holly.
Yes.
Excellent. So we have unanimous votes all around. Thank you guys. I really appreciate that. I might defer for a second here to Jean on her thoughts. Do we need a secretary, or are we okay with just agreeing upon a rotating secretary every meeting, or what do you think, Jean?
Yeah, I don't think it's mandatory to have one, but essentially we should come up with a structure for taking the minute.
Okay. So with that, I wonder if someone might be willing to volunteer to take the minutes tonight. And if you took a look at my meeting minutes and got disconcerted, like, oh my God, I have to write this level of, this level of detail or density, that's just me. That's just my A-type personality kicking in when I write minutes. So You don't have to do it to that level of detail. They don't have to be transcriptions. They just need to cover the major issues that we're discussing. And remember, we have these recordings through NACAM as memorialization of our meetings. So, the public and everybody will always be able to go back to that.
Having said that, Andrew, I do think it's important to make sure we record any votes on anything, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. So is anybody willing to do it for our next meeting, for this meeting, excuse me? Oh boy, okay.
I will volunteer for the next one. I just don't have a piece of paper. I only have the
For this
plan
one,
in front
okay.
of me to take notes on.
No problem. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna step up. I'm gonna do this for you guys again. All right.
We love
But-
you, Andrew. We love
But
you.
I'm putting out the PSA that I'm expecting someone to step up next time. So bring
Andrew,
your
if you want me
paper
to-
and your
We
pens
promise.
and your recording machines and everything else, your
We
stenography machines.
Andrew, if
we
you
might
want me
expect
to do it, I will.
All right, well, we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it, Gene. We'll figure it out. It's not a big deal. Okay, so let's get started with the meat of the agenda here. So last time we talked about the master plan strategy spreadsheet, and Gene and I worked together to sort of make some updates to it, and I'm happy to kind of cover how we did that and what those updates mean. Like last time, would it be helpful for folks if I shared my screen? Okay, I'm seeing head nods.
Yes.
All right,
Yeah,
I'm
yes,
going to do
please.
that right
I
now.
have it open at the second screen right now, so.
Okay, you have it up yourself. Okay, I'll just for folks that don't, I'll just share my screen. Give me one moment here to do that.
And for the benefit of the public, the agenda has a link to the spreadsheet that is going to be displayed. And so everybody can access it via the agenda link as well.
That's right. Okay, can everybody see this spreadsheet?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so basically what we did, Gene and I, is we went through the entire spreadsheet, and we added one column, and I'll scroll all the way to the right, show you what that is, a notes column, just to include any context behind if any progress had been made, or if there needed to be a stakeholder that needed to be reached out to, or if some progress had been made, what kind of progress had been made. So that's what you see in the notes section. There is some color coding, and it's very basic in nature. Basically, we have orange to represent if some level of progress had been made, or if some maybe incremental starting point had been identified for this strategy, and then green to denote if a particular project had been, or a strategy had been sort of, I would say, substantially completed, or something that we could certainly say we're checking off. We've definitely addressed in this master plan as of yet. So with that, I think what I can do is maybe run through some of these, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible in the interest of time, unless Kelly or anybody else, do you guys want to start off with any questions before I run through them, or initial thoughts, or would it be helpful for me to just run through it?
What's our goal of running through it?
There's no goals other than just sort of to speak to what's on there. But if folks have already looked it over and they want to just jump right into the material, I'm happy to do it that way. There'll be less time.
Yeah, let's go swimming.
All right. So with that, I guess the one other comment I would make before I'll open it to you guys is the notes that are shaded in gray all the way on the right. Those represent comments that those represent comments, except for the third one. I noticed I mistakenly shaded one thing here. It says MPIC should contact sustainability share. That probably shouldn't be shaded gray. But the other ones are ones that are comments that we got from discussing these strategies with the DPW department. So public. because many of these touch public. So I don't know if anybody had questions about the content, the way we, what we had decided that was substantially complete, what we decided was had been started as complete. If anybody had any comments on strategies that haven't even been addressed, happy to discuss any of it.
I think it might be interesting to run through the ones that are complete or
Okay.
substantially complete. So, because I mean, if there's items on the list that are done and that are considered done, it'd be great to be able to go, hey, we've completed these items on the master plan.
Okay.
Does that?
Yeah, that's
I'll
agree
actually
with-
caution against that in the matter of time. If they're complete, are they really stuff that we need to discuss? I
up
think
to
we
you guys. The only thing I would say is
Yeah,
the only thing I would say is the only discussion that could happen as a result of discussing what is done is if someone says, well, what if we need to do more and it's not really done? If there's a dispute as to whether it's actually done. That's the only thing I can think of. But
Yeah, I think it might be worthwhile to go through them, Andrew, and just get your thoughts on how you decided they were done.
okay.
Could I
So-
offer one thought on this, which is as we get things that come off the conveyor belt, so to speak, that are done, we should think about a way that we want to relay this to the public. So as Andrew is going through this, it might be good to start formulating how do we relay this and what do we do with this, more than just kind of check it off and throw it in the box, right? Because these are true accomplishments. So I would just ask that as we're going through it, if that makes sense to folks.
I agree with you, Chris, and I have some ideas in my head about that, and I can throw them out there, but I'm also going to be eager to hear what other folks have to say about it. So I'll move forward fairly quickly. So I don't think we have to spend too much time on this, but just to speak quickly to some of these that are already done. Line number 10, strategy number 95, develop a vision for maximizing the potential of the Stevens estate. You know, we just recently submitted a report to the Board of Selectmen from the Long-Term Advisory Committee for the Stevens estate, and they're taking action on it. Straightforward. So a vision has, so to speak, been developed. Strategy 102, line number 13 of the spreadsheet, create a master plan implementation committee. I think we can all agree that that's done.
There you go.
Line number 18 in the spreadsheet, strategy number 1, review the Osgood Smart Growth Overlay District and update the zoning bylaw to ensure the district encourages the type of uses that are attractive in today's market and consistent with the direction of the master plan. So, you know, town meeting in 2019 voted to rescind the Osgood Smart Growth Overlay District. And then since then, we've seen the Amazon project get reviewed and permitted there. So that's ostensibly done.
I would actually,
Although,
Andrew, I'd actually categorize that as not applicable rather than done, because it really doesn't apply anymore.
well, that's true, but I would say that given that the master plan, you know, it is what it is at this point, we're not like editing. The thing with the master plan is it's not a living document in the sense that we're not editing it as far as what the strategies are. So,
All right.
being that we can't like change that, I look at it, this is my opinion, and if others disagree, that's fine. I look at it sort of like it's either a yes or a no, right? It's either, and there might be some things in there that are not applicable that we never address, but that's the reason we don't address them, because there's no
I think
reason
that brings
to.
up a good point, Andrew, and not to go down this tangent now, but do we need to think about, because this is a 20-year plan or 18 year plan, do we need to think about having kind of a formal process for change control? If things do change, is there ways to input or take things out of the master plan, and how does that happen? With input, what kind of input and full transparency? Is that something that we need to consider, and that we have, if we do, that we have a really clear process for that?
Sure.
So
I mean,
just kind of tangent to that, right? Maybe we discuss that.
I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, I think the only caveat to it is just, you have to think about how much time and effort went into the master plan and how much community input went into it, right? It's quite a process. So likewise, even if there are smaller changes, one would suspect that we would need to go through a pretty vigorous process, outreach to the community, hold a public hearing or something like that. So I guess, folks would need to decide if that's necessary or if that's what we'd want to do, or if it's just best to, address the strategies in the context of understanding that some of the facts on the ground will change over the next 10 to 15 years.
Well, I guess what I would do, Andrew, is I would echo Chris Nobly in saying, what's the expectation of the public when large projects have shown up on the radar that are not included in the master plan? Amazon, Royal Crest redevelopment. What would be the public's expectation about what they might be thinking we might be doing or should be doing with respect to thinking about those projects, which are going to have fairly significant impacts on our town? It might be a special discussion topic we have as a committee.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But I would say too that yes, the idea of Amazon or other projects like that might not show up specifically in the plan, but the spirit of those projects does. When you see, and I'm not looking at probably one of the more relevant strategies, but there are strategies that speak to general redevelopment and maximizing economic development opportunities. And certainly seeing, the Osgood parcel redevelop into the Amazon project speaks to some of those. So I would say some of the aspirational higher level thinking on some of these strategies probably line up with the Amazon project and some of the larger projects that have happened. But there's no way, obviously, for any master plan to anticipate every single, variable or possibility that can happen over the next,
10 years or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
All good thoughts. I'll just for the sake of time, I'll keep running through some of these so folks can hear what we have accomplished. Further down, line number 40, strategy number 49, under transportation, hire a consultant to evaluate and recommend possible streetscape improvements along Main Street and Water Street. We've done that. We've hired Beta, which is an engineering firm out of Rhode Island, to do a downtown improvement master plan. So they are currently engaged in that process. Again, under downtown improvements, transportation, strategy number 51 on line 42. Evaluate the effectiveness of changing zoning along Main Street to vary front setbacks to provide additional space for wider sidewalks and enhanced landscaping.
So I'm sorry. So just a question on 49 in terms of kind of what's our definition of done there? How do we know when it's completed? Is it just the fact that we've hired someone, or that the recommendations are complete too?
Yeah, good question. So in my mind, I marked it as 100% complete because I'm reading this very literally. I'm seeing the words hire a consultant to evaluate, and we have in fact done that. So they aren't done with their work, and they will be hopefully later or early next year. But in my mind, if we're reading this literally, I would say we have completed it. But I'd be happy to to adjust that if folks see that differently.
And Kelly, I guess reading down to line 52, I think that kind of incorporates more of what I would anticipate their plan being, right? Use consistent streetscape treatments. Hold on, sorry. I guess in signage and improving you know what I mean? That's part of the implementation I would imagine of their vision, right?
Okay, so so they go hand in hand. I guess I just want to make sure as we're reading these, because each one of these can mean different things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Like some of them don't really end. Like to me, like the vision for the Stevens estate, I'm like, but we don't really, what is the vision? We don't really, someone said they had a vision. That doesn't mean it's done. So I agree with you. But I think if you keep reading, it seems like that's going to be more of the implementation of whatever their plan is, I think is where that's kind of captured there. Because to get to the Mill District, you have to go down Water Street.
Does it make sense? We have it categorized under column B as downtown improvements, but basing on what we just discussed there, does it make sense to further refine this spreadsheet to basically keep those actions that are related to each other together? So yes, we've hired a consultant. Now there's the subsequent actions that play off of that. Do we want to kind of just make sure those stay together? So it'd be like, action 1, action 1A, 1B, 1C type thing. I'm throwing it out there just as a means to keep, we've identified things that are complete, but there's theoretically follow-up components to that.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, John, because absolutely thinking about dependencies and prerequisites, because some of them, if you look at this, they jump between plan elements. A lot, there could be a zoning line item, and then there's another change in, the economic development or land use or something, or open spaces, and, making sure, if both may need to be done to declare either of them done.
So maybe that's something that we need to look at within this spreadsheet, right? Which ones are connected?
Yeah.
Dependencies or prerequisites, and look at that. And then, at some point, just if there is any ambiguity around the definition of what does it mean to be done, so that we're really clear. We might not have it right, but at least we've written it down. And if we're wrong, everybody sees that we're wrong. And we can go from there. Maybe that's just a way to expand a little bit more and to make sure that we keep to the heart, to the intent of the master plan.
Right.
One more thing that I'm just asking, just to get the conversation going. Is it worth our while to include the responsible parties for these actions? So, who is responsible for hiring a consultant, and subsequently, when that consultant's report gets issued, who's the authorities within the town who review that or take action upon it, just to identify that for information purposes.
So to that specifically, John, we do that in the spreadsheet.
Okay.
If you take a look at column G, I believe, let me just, apologies for having to scroll here. Yeah, so column G does identify, for instance, the Board of Selectmen and the Community and Economic Development Department, my department, to kind of head up this process. And
okay. I just hadn't seen that column, that's all.
Yep, and it doesn't break it out super specifically, but it kind of gives general charge to those stakeholders. And in many cases, sure, there's going to be strategies identified that identify certain stakeholders, and there might be additional stakeholders really that are involved in the process. So it doesn't always boil down to what is shown on this spreadsheet, but in many cases it will. And I do want to just quickly mention that these are grouped together all in this. If you look at column B, downtown improvements, the idea is really to sort of group all of these elements together because they are all interrelated. Some of them may get done first. Some of them may not be as linked to each other as others. But in generally, the idea here is to group strategies together that can happen in a sequential manner.
So Andrew, can you
go
scroll down a little bit? Because I just want to piggyback on that, because the idea was downtown improvements, when you look at line 46 of the spreadsheet and 71, they're spread out amongst all the chapters in the master plan. And so the second column, the common theme downtown improvements was intended to pull them out of each individual chapter and kind of group them together. And further, I just want to add to the shading. I mean, Andrew and I didn't always agree on these shadings. We had a lot of discussion over why he thought it was green and I thought it was yellow. So I would just suggest that once you get further into this and you identify a shading strategy, that maybe do a definition of what green means so that everybody agrees and actually lay out what green means to you. Because like I said, each time Andrew and I, the meetings went on quite a while because we did see a difference. So.
I think I completely agree, Jean. I think it gets into the definition of done, right? How do we know each one of these is done? And I think part of that then gets into the bigger question of whose decision is it when it's done? And that gets to sort of what's the kind of the authority of this group, right? Is that this group's decision? Is it done or not to the intent of the master plan, or is it the town group that's doing it? I think it's just kind of laying that out of who's that decision-making group, who gets to declare victory, right? And just I think that's part of this, and what is victory and who gets to say it.
Kelly, just this is Stan. Just I've been, maybe it's a discussion we need to have, but it's sort of, what is the authority of this committee? What is its charter and what is its authority? And I think that might be helpful for us to have at least a chat about that at one of our upcoming meetings, to think about what we think we're supposed to be doing and how we go about it. I think that might be helpful, because I've thought of this as more of an advisory committee like the finance committee versus an implementation committee. But I could be wrong, or I could be just misunderstand. So
Well, I would like to suggest that the color coding is done by, or the decision is made by the agency that's identified. What is it, column G or whatever, the one that's responsible. And then the responsibility of this committee is to evaluate that, to see if we agree or if we think that they're falling short. I mean, we don't really have authority, I don't think, to give final approval on anything. All we can do is call attention to items or issues.
So a couple comments. So one, just in regards to, mission and to what Stan was just speaking about. I mean, there is as we discussed at the last meeting, there is a mission statement, and then anybody can go back to that and reference it. But generally at a high level, it's to really organize and prioritize these strategies and report out on the progress with respect to them. So I think everybody knows we need to submit a report to the Board of Selectmen on a quarterly basis on master plan implementation updates, or or progress. So if, so this committee is going to have to agree on the content of that reporting out. And so if the majority of you do not agree that, for instance, we are done with, strategy number 51, evaluate the effectiveness of changing zoning on Main Street, then we're not going to say that that's a finalized or complete strategy in our report out. You know what I mean? We're not going to submit a report with everyone's name on it that everyone doesn't agree with, or that the majority of the committee doesn't agree with. So there will be some vetting of the idea of whether or not something is complete when we develop that report. And then, one other thing, just in terms of mission and whether you guys are, I mean, I agree with Stan, you are advisory in nature. And I think there should come a point at which when you see strategies in this document that you say, okay, we want to prioritize this one high, we haven't done this yet, we haven't even addressed it yet, then it's strategize, how are we going to move forward on that? And it might require, a correspondence to or bringing in a department to discuss it with them, like a DPW, or corresponding with them and saying, we want to prioritize that. How are we going to do this? And getting that conversation started. But again, it's advisory in nature, and just telling different departments and different boards and commissions that you're prioritizing X, Y, and Z strategy right now because you've had this discussion and you feel like this is a low-hanging fruit for the town to focus on, and let's discuss ways that we can accomplish these goals.
So this really all sounds to me like it's putting together kind of a standard operating manual on this. In other words, how do we evaluate what we've got in front of us, and how do we communicate it? And that's, I think, really up to us. So I think that's part of the dual challenge that we have here, which is it's really kind of up to us to draw the lines of explaining what is done, why we think it's done, or what the process is for commenting or impacting these. And it seems to me maybe just some simple suggestions to start off with, all in pencil, and then we look to kind of focus that as we move on. But I think that may be a little bit of part of the problem, which is coming up with standards. Let's just come up with kind of what the standards are in evaluating, communicating, and following through on this. I'm not a project manager. I think there's some folks that have that expertise in this group, and I kind of ask for their guidance on that.
Well, let me just back up a bit. So
Mhm.
obviously we have this master plan that's been created for the town. We've put resources, time, effort, money into it. Is there an inherent assumption amongst our committee and the members here present that all parties in the town, Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Economic Development, how do we know that they're, what assurances do we have that they're evaluating projects and whatnot that come across them that are under their purview, that they're holding it to this standard? Are we making the assumption that, okay, when a project comes in, they're weighing it against what's been identified in the master plan report? And likewise, if so, do we serve as a check against, making the fail safe on that? But without that basic level of understanding, how do we move forward?
So if I could respond to that,
Yeah.
I don't believe that this committee's charge would be to be a check against that. I think this committee's charge is more in line with trying to ensure that that it's less likely that boards and commissions don't operate in a way that is in contrast to the master plan. So and just to also sort of put it in broader context, when you look at different projects that go before, for instance, the planning board or the conservation commission, there are a number of priorities in the master plan that you could tick off and say, well, it meets these priorities, while simultaneously not necessarily meeting certain other priorities. So that's how large and wide ranging some of these plans are that local boards are considering. So it's hard to say definitively in a lot of cases that it's not in compliance with the master plan when it may comply with an aspect of the master plan and not a certain other aspect. But I think this board's charge is more along the lines of sort of setting the broader, I think, higher level goals and strategies to advance plan priorities. And I mentioned one example last time, for instance, like with respect to affordable housing. Right now, you don't see a lot of projects approved with that have affordable housing component. Well, if we don't have an inclusionary zoning ordinance, we may never see that happen. It may never compel a developer to propose affordable housing. So if this committee places that as a high priority and an inclusionary zoning ordinance is adopted or inclusionary zoning bylaw is adopted by the town, then project proponents for multifamily housing are going to have to propose affordable housing as part of their projects going forward, and that then your goal will have been satisfied. You'll have affected change. You'll have affected high-level policy to move these priorities forward. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a check on projects before boards in the future. Does that make sense?
Andrew, one other thing I would add that maybe give John and the rest of the committee some perspective. Am I accurate in saying that department goals have all been tied into the master plan whenever possible too? And my understanding was that each department is operating with these as part of their strategy and ultimate goals. Is that correct?
I'll
Yes.
defer to Jean on that.
Yeah. So we each individually have to set goals every year, and they're included in the annual report. And then, as you're aware, the Board of Selectmen also set goals, and obviously those goals kind of get assigned to certain people or departments as well. And so they're all certainly in alignment with the master plan goals. So
Yep.
And there's certain ones that aren't, but they're just work that DPW has to get done every year, and they set their own goals too. It might not be specifically called out in here, but you could, I'm sure, relate it to any one of these particular goals.
One
And I
thought, I think, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to clarify one more thing because I'm not sure it's that obvious, but although Andrew and I did go through all those shaded ones and we informed with the shading of red and the yellowish and the green, there's a number of these that do not have notes. However, that doesn't mean there hasn't been any movement or advancement on those. It's just we weren't able to reach out to the Historical Commission or to FONAT directly or to the Sustainability Committee. So there's still a lot of legwork, just really getting status updates on the individual line items.
Is it helpful for me to continue to move through this in terms of the accomplished, or what we say are the accomplished strategies, or do we want to break off and conduct the conversation about this in a different way?
I think we should move on, Andrew, because we spent time, three of us spent time on that very subject of prioritization, and have some results of our conversations to present to the committee.
Okay. Do others agree that we want to move on?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, let's hear what folks have to say about prioritization and how we want to move forward on that.
Sure. So I'll lead us off. Stan, Jay, and I have worked together over the past few weeks coming out of the last meeting. And so what I'll lead off with is a bit of an overarching preamble and a few thoughts and ideas that we come up with, and maybe one that I think warrants maybe a larger, broader discussion in a subsequent meeting. And then I'll hand over the floor to Stan and then to Jay to elaborate more on some of the things that we came up with. And again, dialogue and discussion all the way. So part of what we really tried to start with really kind of overarching and aligning on what we thought the overall goal of the plan was, which we thought in so many ways was really guiding the town's destiny to ensure that we've got strategies / projects, whatever you would like to call them, that will have the greatest impact on achieving their objectives. Because there's a large volume of really great ideas, but some are going to pull the lever more than others in terms of what their aligned objective is. And so part of what we looked at, as we think about effective prioritization, is, I think we talked a bit about kind of the definition of done, but we were even really trying to kind of understand, even as we look at the different master plan elements and/or objectives, the three of us were able to convince ourselves of different ways about what's most important to the town in terms of its overall true north. So we said, we had different perspectives on, say, what's the strategic value of achieving and maintaining the 10% affordable house minimum versus revitalizing downtown versus addressing transportation concerns. We could look at that and all come up with different reasons why which one of those is number 1, 2, or 3. And then, from that really starts driving very much differences in how you think about other components in the plan, say, where you're going to have to prioritize making zoning changes, as I mentioned before, as an example. So, we kind of really said, we've got a lot of content in here, but as I think we all knew, challenged on how to look at them and organize appropriately. So, and we'll go through and elaborate more on each of these points as I hand over to Stan and then to Jay. First off, really feel that there's the need for some more kind of qualification and quantification, and quantification maybe more in air quotes, both in terms of the potential investment / cost and what we think is the benefit of each of those individual strategies. Because we're really trying to get to a place where we have, and again, I'll even air quote because these are at high level, have a return on investment, because really understand, the value proposition that these things will bring back to the table really gives us the why we would put one strategy ahead of another strategy. And right now there's a large list of really great ideas. And we would always think as individuals, think about them very differently of why we would fight for one and maybe not for another. We also felt that we needed to have, and this is, I think, a topic for a future meeting, I think we've got a lot and to kind of get aligned on is, does the master plan breathe? Is there a certain criteria of newer, highly impactful and odds are high investment initiatives, i.e. Amazon at Osgood Landing, or right next to my neighborhood, Royal Crest, that should those go into the plan? Because should we be managing and investing and making strategic decisions about the master plan in addition to other things that perhaps that are coming up more recently that again maybe trump small t things that are in the plan in terms of how we make these decisions? So that was, I think we were aligned to thinking it may be something that needs to live and breathe, that there needs to be some criteria that says what is master plan worthy that would be triaged and added to the plan. And then the plan for things not yet started kind of goes through another reprioritization to make sure at reasonable intervals, we always have the highest priority things that we want to do next at the top of the queue. And that's kind of more the general project management. So what we're going to do, we're going to hand off, and we didn't tackle the answers. That's a really meaty one that really starts with understanding aligning on the philosophy of the plan. So what we're going to share is Stan's going to take the floor and share with you an illustration of the ways to think about quantification and qualification of both investment and value, and why we think it's important, and not to be married to specifically what we came up with as ideas of the criteria, but using them as an illustration of what it would enable us to do as a committee in terms of recommendations. And then Jay's going to talk more about the opportunity for storytelling, which would help, I think, us as a committee get aligned on the relative value, even at the highest level of the different plan elements and or the goals, but also of high value back to the town as we're making recommendations. A story behind some of these major blocks would help the town understand there's a yin and a yang to pretty much all of these, and most of us as human beings understand one side of the ledger but maybe not the other. And I'd say, like, for example, the affordable housing, there's multiple layers to that story of why it's there, why it's important, what are the implications. But probably beyond some of you in this committee who are, well immersed and well versed, the average citizen, including myself, we don't really necessarily understand all those dimensions that are going to drive decisions on how we recommend priorities. So Stan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Meredith. So let me start by saying I don't want this. Andrew and Jean, I certainly don't want you to think that I'm trying to start a spreadsheet competition here, because I'm not. That's not any objective here. Let me begin by explaining where I started in my thinking about sort of trying to understand, trying to get my arms wrapped around a solution to the problem. If the problem is setting priorities, ranking the 103 strategies that we have in the plan. And my first cut at that, and let me begin by, if I can do this, share my screen and show you a spreadsheet here that maybe.
You got this, Stan. You got it. You'll share it.
Can I do this?
I have faith in you. You'll do it.
Let me start over again and try this again. So if I do this, I should be able to see.
You want to hover your cursor to the lower half or the lower.
Well,
the
when I do it, I don't see my spreadsheet, so I'm confused.
Well, you don't need. Yeah, so you clicked present now, and you don't see your spreadsheet come up as a window option.
When I click window, right, I get a pop-up, but I don't see my sheet in that pop-up, so I'm confused.
Okay.
Maybe that.
So the other option is you can do your entire screen. Now we're temporarily going to see everything you have, and then you just pull it up.
Yeah. Okay.
But just keep in mind, everything you share, everything that we're going to see anything that you scroll through when you do that.
I get that. Okay. So if I do this, can you see that?
No, we're not seeing anything.
I cannot.
Okay, so, right. So let me go back. I don't know what to tell you about that. So it worked before.
Is it a document that you could email maybe to Andrew or Jean, or and Andrew can share? Or?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share if you want to send it to me.
Yeah, I can do that. Let me do that. I'm just gonna.
Technology.
I know. Well, I'm sort of surprised. I don't know why it wouldn't want to work now when it worked before. It's very clear. Let me just try this one more time. Yep. Nope. Okay. So let me just send it to you straight away, and you can then you can project it. So, okay. Let's see here.
So tell us what we're looking at, Stan, as it's coming up.
Okay. What I did was I took the same sheet that we all have. It's the sheet that's in the back of the document itself as a spreadsheet, and I added some information to allow me to be able to make some, if you will, some analysis, start to do some ranking of the various strategies, the line items, if you will. So,
Excuse me, Stan, can I ask a question? Am I supposed to be seeing this spreadsheet now?
not yet, not
No.
yet,
Okay.
not yet.
I haven't seen anything come in my emails, Stan, just a heads up.
Okay, I just sent it.
Oh, so I should check my email?
No, not yet, George.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to get the email, George, and I'm going to put it up.
Okay, I just sent it to you. It should be there, or it should be there sometime, right?
Just while we're waiting, Meredith, and when you were talking about and kind of leading up at what you looked at, and you mentioned, I love the way you termed it, the breathing, I think you said of the master plan. That was what I would think less eloquently I was trying to get after. I think the same idea when thinking change management, that whatever that is extremely transparent that we have. I think the most important thing is that we document it. Here's what it is. It's not something we take lightly. Here's how it would happen. Here's where we would have to, if it was something worthy, it would have to go to the town, the town people keep that, all of us, of the citizens part of it. So I think it was just interesting. I think I like the word breathing, right? Since breathing part, that we don't do it in a vacuum, that it holds the weight as important as it is, but it's not. Realize it's not in a vacuum.
Yeah, because that's the whole, for anybody who's familiar with kind of agile approaches, the whole concept is by design, it embraces change, which is even more brilliant ideas emerge every day. And original brilliant ideas may suddenly not be quite as brilliant because the world has changed and the needs have changed. And so that's, I'm slightly passionate about, how do we make sure that we're not treating this as, and that's all there is, as opposed to having a mechanism by which we can continue what they call groom it, using project speak, to make sure that we're not missing the fact that the needs of the town and the needs of the world are evolving.
Yeah. Can I make one comment on that before we get into Stan's spreadsheet?
Absolutely.
Which is just that, and I don't disagree that we should absolutely be as nimble as possible. In fact, it's refreshing to be a municipality and be able to try to do that. And but my only concern is that I don't. My personal view, and others might disagree, is that the master plan itself really, I don't think it is supposed to function as a living document, so to speak. That said, that doesn't mean that we can't tack on certain strategies that we feel amplify the existing strategies that are already outlined in the document. So, if we said, if there's something related to economic development and it says we should do this because it's related to economic development, it's not to say that we can't do another version of that strategy or something completely different to go toward the idea of completing that strategy. I just don't necessarily think it would result in changing the plan or saying we're going to amend the plan to reflect these new strategies or these new goals, because that in and of itself, I think would be a process where we'd actually undertake a new master planning process. At some point in the near future, we'll do this all over again, where we'll have a new plan where we may carry over some of the strategies that we've already adopted in this existing master plan, and ones that maybe haven't been fully satisfied or need to be ongoing, and then we add on to those. And I think that's part of a new master planning process. That's my view, but I mean, I'm happy to entertain other, more discussion on that as well.
I mean,
Yeah,
But anyway, I do have. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry. Just the plan has been identified, and I agree that it really shouldn't be subject to change. At the same time, I'm not, and this is just personal, I'm not one for adhering to it strictly by the words. I believe master plans are best implemented when there is some allowance for interpretation. You know, does what's being proposed accomplish the mission of the statement, you know, or is it, and it doesn't have to be literally word for word, you know. There's nuance a lot of times, and I'm one that would rather allow for it than to rule against it, if you will.
I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, I think and we'll move on, but I was just thinking, and again, maybe it's a future meeting topic. It's just at the end, I was assuming, perhaps wrong, that, you know, all of these great opportunities, strategies are at the end of the day contending at the end for all the same resources that all the other things that are being managed. I think at some point it's all coming out of the same pool. And so if we have, you know, kind of multiple kind of lists of things out there, does the town comfortable that at the end of the day, the right things in the largest macro view are the things that are being invested in? So that could be a future topic.
Should I run through this pretty quickly?
Since we have it,
Sure.
Yeah.
So
Does everyone see it? Does everyone see it on screen?
I can
Okay.
see it.
Yep.
Let me pick up on the point Meredith made, which is this is what we hope is the basis for a conversation, not the answer. This is not the answer. This is just a discussion document that we can use in the future to decide how we want to approach ranking the various strategies in terms of setting priorities. So, Andrew, if you go over to column like PQRS, those 4 columns. Right there, okay? So what I did was I took the columns, as you see to the left there, time frame, level of effort, and financial resources, and just assigned some numeric values, sort of sequentially increasing as the values increase. So if, for example, the effort was minimal, that was a 1, moderate 2, difficult 3. Time frames, ongoing 1, up to 11 years, I think that got to be a 4, maybe. And then the budget the same way. I made sure that we had budget values for everything and assigned those from basically no cost up to the most expensive identified budget items, and gave those all numeric values. And then if you look at the columns there that are highlighted, the so-called cost column, could be a ranking column, is the product of those 3 values. Right? So it's the product of time frame, level of effort, and money, funding. And Andrew, if you want to, you can sort on that column from largest to smallest. And
is there which one do you want me to sort?
Cost, the one you're on right there, cost, right? Okay. If you sort on that. Yes, right. So what you see, and unfortunately we can't see it over on the left-hand side, but what you see are about go back, Andrew, to where we were just for a second. So let's say we look at the first, it's like about the first 6 or 8 lines, right? That go up to the numeric value of like 45. Okay, now you can go back to the left, Andrew, and you can look at those items.
Andrew, does it make sense to hide some of those columns?
Well, or you could whatever you want to do. That's fine. You could hide everything if you want. I don't care. Do whatever is most.
I can't think of how to hide columns right off the bat. So
You're getting a lot of spreadsheet pressure, Andrew, just for sharing.
Yeah.
I know, right?
It's easy, Andrew. It's really easy. Highlight the column.
Split the spreadsheet. Just split
highlight the columns. Right click it, and it will say hide.
Okay. Well, I don't know how you guys want me to how you want to see this right now. So
everything see from that column, column H.
Yeah.
highlight everything, starting with column I, right there. Highlight everything over to where we were at column P. Yep. Bingo. Okay, now go back over where we were, right?
There we go.
Okay, so now you see sort of the gist of this. So here's the stuff that has the, ended up at the top of the cost list, if you will. Things that are very expensive, take a long time. Those first three items are in the 11 to 15 year category, and are very difficult to do, right? So this is only by way of trying to start to think about what each of these strategies represent in terms of their difficulty, not in terms at all of their benefit, but just how hard they will be to do. And so when you look at those, like about first six or eight lines, you see really the most difficult items in this whole sheet. For example, that item, that strategy number 55, which is line 10, right? That's, upgrade the remaining set of public buildings in our town. That's a big project. We know that. I mean, that's a big deal. So, these are the heavy hitters. And, when we get around to thinking about these in terms of, trying to rank them, and it's going to be important that we understand that these are very complicated and difficult line items, strategies that are going to have to be dealt with. So that's on that side of the ledger. Now, if you look at the columns that are basically blank, so I started then by trying to figure out how to assign, if you will, a benefit to each of these strategies. And that's more like what you and Jean were doing, where you sit down and sort of talk about each strategy and say, what do we think the benefit of this strategy are? And those three columns represent scope, which in this context, I mean that it would be the number of residents affected. So if this is a very focused activity, it might only be a smaller number of residents affected, whereas others might be most of the town or even all of the town. So that's scope. Impact is how much this would affect the town, what it might represent in terms of changes that the town would see. And then finally, effect would in fact be, if you will, the benefit. What good outcome would accrue to their town, to the town as a result of this? It could be some minimal effect, forming a master plan implementation, minimal effect, to a very significant effect where the town could greatly benefit from the implementation of the strategy. So that's kind of some thinking about how to go about prioritizing, ranking all these strategies. But it, again, as you and Jean have been doing, it requires work, because in this particular case, given this particular approach, would have to all begin thinking about how to assign values to give us a benefit for each of the strategies, to which we could then compare the, if you will, the so-called cost, the impact, what it takes to actually achieve that strategy. So anyway, that's some thinking on how to go about trying to rank all of these. Now, that of course has to be adjusted based on the work that you, Andrew, and Jean have already done in terms of the strategies that have been for which significant effort has already taken place or which have been completed. So this would have to be adjusted for that. But so these are some ideas that we can begin thinking about, and I would respectfully submit that I think if everybody thinks it's an okay thing, we could distribute the spreadsheet to the committee members and let everybody take a look at it. It's very interesting actually to just take the sheet itself and start to just sort it by the various columns to see how things start to look when you start to sort by, the amount of time projects take or the amount of money they cost. It's interesting to start to get some ideas of the various strategies. So I would, I'm happy to answer questions about what this represents, but I guess my suggestion would be that we would distribute this spreadsheet to the committee members and everybody could take a look, and then at a subsequent meeting, we could have a discussion about whether or not people think this is first a reasonable kind of approach, and second, how we would try to use this to come up with some ranking, some way to rank the various strategies in terms of making recommendations for what to do first.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
To follow up on that, what I would suggest is that we each fill in that column with a number.
Yeah.
And then amalgamate them by making turning them in, and somebody takes all 12 columns or however many there are.
Yeah.
Averages them, one average to see what that is, and then the other one is to see which items have the greatest discrepancy.
Right.
But we'd have to agree on how to fill in the number. You'd have to provide us with a formula for how to fill it in.
Andrew, go down to the notes tab.
And I would I like the idea. I think that before I'd want to start personally putting numbers on it.
Yeah.
I love the idea. I love doing this. It gets very qualitative, gets the number we can rank things, is make sure that we all agree on what they mean. Well, how do we know when it's done? Because I think we could look at it differently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So here's my first cut at each of those three, if you will, benefits columns. So a 1 is minimal coverage, a 2 is moderate coverage, and the 3 is, the whole town more or less, right? So that would be the scope. Impact would be minimal changes, moderate change, or significant change. Like if we're changing zoning town-wide, that would be a significant change. And then the benefits are the same, a minimal benefit for some of these strategies, a moderate benefit. Some could have significant benefits, like, for example, the rec complex would have once implemented, a significant benefit to the town. So anyway, that's a first cut at how we might go about doing it, right?
Can I
Dan,
quibble,
one thing that I might, go ahead, George.
Can I quibble? Minimal, moderate, and significant. I think the moderate changes can be significant. I question the use of significant as the third one. Why not just go large? Minimal, moderate, and large.
Right.
Whatever. This is all one person's opinion. We can start here and try this, or we can adjust at this level and try something else. But
I'm certainly not questioning the numerical scheme or the strategy. It's just the terminology. As I said, I think moderates can be significant also.
Well, yeah, no, and everybody, when they do their coding, they can make their own notes and provide the notes along with the coding.
All right, I'm going to call it large.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of semantics. I get it, but at the end of the day, the number's what's important. If you want to call it large and outstanding and call it 2 and 3, we can call it whatever we want. The purpose is the number, and it's kind of like small, medium, large. So where are we going to go with this? So I don't want to, pass the hour here, get caught up in semantics of this name versus that name.
Agree. And I'm gonna say, I don't think I was. I think what I was talking about was that we all have similar definitions of what the strategies before we start to rank them, because I don't know if we necessarily do.
Yeah, I think it's imperative we agree on a methodology, because honestly, I think this is absolutely the right direction that we're headed. This is I think, and then subject to all review by all members here. But if we're not all working on the same level here to review it, we're not going to get anything out of it. I mean, for instance, and I'm only citing my level of expertise relative to the transportation categories we just saw on the previous tab. There were a couple of things that George had assigned as significant time. For instance, and I'll just throw it out there, line number 5 relative to work on 114. For instance, that's something we can be working on right now. That's actually that time frame is actually way shorter than what he's looking at. So, and I'm just citing that one as one that jumped out to me just because it's something I have knowledge of how that works with the state. So that's why I want to make sure that we're all kind of in agreement that when we assign values to this, that we're all working with the same value system.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say, John, is that the values here on the cost side were values that were already in that sheet. I did not invent those. They already exist. So somebody had already decided that would take a long time and it was a difficult project. I didn't.
No, I'm saying your column P there, your cost, which is your summation, not summation, product of the 3 breakdowns. Yep. So you had assigned a 4 for a time, for instance, and
well,
that would be something.
Yeah, that's already in the sheet. If we could that I'm just providing a numeric value for something that was already in the sheet. I didn't invent that number. That number is in the sheet. So just saying.
And I think, John, to your point, though, is that's why we're here, right? Is to take things where our level of expertise has come from in our background and say, hey, they have this cited for 5 years. We can really do this in 5 months. So let's just get this done and turn it to green with each one of our individual expertises. But to your point, right, they're going to be time frames that are off.
You know, for lack of a better term, I guess.
Yep.
So the other thing that I would maybe ask us to think about quickly as a group here is how these things that are connected, and do we want to put that in some of our in this evaluation, because the connectivity is a multiplier factor potentially. Well, a goal may touch on many things. That may be a way to think about it in terms of its importance or significance if it touches a number of different parameters within or components of the master plan. Is that something that is important to consider, and that's different than impact, because it's again, I would say multiplier connectivity. Is that something we want to weigh?
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree with that, Chris. That's a wonderful thing if we can make some progress along that line. My issue is that this is so potentially complicated that it's very tough for me not to just get overwhelmed by trying to figure out how to make sense out of 103 line items that vary from, form an implementation committee to, do major transportation changes in our town. So it's like when you have that kind of variability, I just have this. I'm constantly fighting to not get overwhelmed by this and think, how can we possibly rank all this stuff? How's this going to work? So, I'm just sort of struggling to try to do that. And this was sort of a first small step in that direction to sort of say, well, maybe this gives us some idea now. And admittedly, this doesn't at all address those interrelationships of many of these strategies, so that's a whole nother aspect of this that is not at all addressed by this, not at all. So,
all right.
So just saying, I'm open to any possible suggestion on how we can go about doing this. This is just one feeble attempt to start to do something here so we can begin to have a more intelligent discussion about ranking. That's all it means. So
Yeah.
And one concept that can work in that is if you can say, this strategy is the leading item, this is the driver, and there may be 1, 2, 3, or 4 others that are supporting. So you would first look at, if you get to a way of how to relatively prioritize, kind of define the ROI of the leading, then you have to go and look at the investment for the supporting. So you're not kind of double counting kind of the impact. You kind of say some of these maybe don't have a line of their own because we wouldn't do this but for to enable that. And it's that you would want to be prioritizing to then say, now what has to happen? That gets back to what we were talking about dependencies and prerequisites.
right.
Yep.
Let me throw this out there. Does it make sense to break up this ranking and just subsets amongst us? Say 3 of us will tackle one category and rank them just to ease the burden as far as, on Stan and whatnot. 103 is kind of tough to rank them, but if we break them down into categories within our relative areas of expertise, is that something that's more feasible? A lot more realistic, gives us a better, at the end, we'll get a better ranking out of it.
That, John, that would certainly be one approach. Like, for example, and it wouldn't necessarily need to be a lot of people, but if an individual took one of the master plan areas like transportation or housing or land use or open space and just tried to do assign some of the benefit values for those, that would at least be a help. And then
that's what I'm getting at. But I'd rather have multiple people so we can get a better average gauge, in case someone has, ranks something really high, but somebody else ranks it really low. So we don't have any, so we don't, have any major outliers, I should say.
Sure. So I certainly think any of us would be open to suggestions on how we might do that. John, what do you think? How would we organize 9 people into 8 groups or something to do? I'm nodding my head vigorously in the up and down in the vertical plane, right?
And I think to some of that, however we break up those groups, part of what those groups need to look at the strategy and make and capture some further assumptions to elaborate. Because, for example, item 110, 185, that would need to be elaborated a bit more on making this assumption or assessment about impact and, and value based on, I think, that the town's public schools kind of, what does that include?
Right.
I mean, if again, I'm just throwing out suggestions here, and it might be best to follow up via email on this just for the sake of time. But if everybody was to say, all right, of the master plan element categories, you pick 2, and within that subset, you do your own individual rankings once we kind of establish what we want to use for number rankings. And then we can reconvene, we can converse via email or whatnot, but at least we can get the ball rolling in that regard.
Yeah, I like that.
Kelly, what do you think? Does that make any sense to you?
I will apologize. I got distracted by a handled but small home emergency. So I was dealing with do we need to go to the ER or not question. So I will, it's fine. We decided no. So I will say I did not hear what the next steps were there. I apologize.
That's okay. You can listen to the tape, right?
So can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Please. So well, just a couple comments that John was making. I think it's challenging to converse over email because in the spirit of open meeting law, you're really not supposed to do that. So what I think is best to do, if folks agree broadly with John's original idea, which would be to break out the categories and have subsets of the committee get together and rank each category, within each category. I think that's a good idea. I think it's a good way to break this off into manageable sections. And then you can reconvene at the next meeting and discuss what each group came out with. There can be a reporting out by each subgroup or subcommittee. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense, Andrew. Although, let me just say, I'm channeling you in this, right? I think we have to be very careful that we don't get sucked into, if you'll pardon this expression, rewriting the master plan. You know, we don't want to we don't want to get too carried away with this, right? Just enough, but not too much. You know,
Well,
you've reminded us a couple of times very gently. It is what it is, right? We've got it.
Yeah, but I don't think that prioritizing or ranking the already written strategies would be quote unquote rewriting the plan. I think it would just be saying, okay, you know, it would just be evaluating them at face value for what they are and deciding what within each category is worth tackling first or next, or what's more realistic as far as low hanging fruit.
So as long as you as the referee says there's no foul, we're good, right?
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, okay.
Sure. So I stopped sharing because it's a little, I apologize because it's just a little distracting trying to engage with the meeting where I'm.
I think we're pretty much done with that anyway. So that's, you know, that's enough. And all I would say is that I would offer a couple of options. One is maybe Kelly and I. Kelly, are you still there? Maybe not. I'll go with her afterwards.
I apologize. I am here. I was listening.
Okay. You and I could sit down and we could figure out how to, you know, sort of divvy up something among the 8 or 9 of us, you know, into 2-person groups to do something or other. We could do that, or we could let, or we could, you know, think of some other approach, you know.
Yeah, I would agree. Maybe we divvy up and then we put it out there, and then people can change, right? If we
So we can have a
go.
subsequent conversation then.
Yeah, because then I think
about how to do that.
The other thing it might be valuable to do a small subcommittee on is just maybe not expanding, but it's not the right word. So Andrew, correct my with the words here, but just really clearly defining for all of us what the role and or authority advisory of the committee is, because I think having those guardrails might help keep us on the straight and narrow path. So, because I think this is one of these things where there are a lot of changes and different components that could happen, but where should we focus our time and energy, right? What's the right thing? So I think it would just be helpful, maybe a few of us in a and then we review it in the next, and you just have a draft for something to look at the next meeting, just in writing, and we can change it.
Why don't we do that? Why don't we do this? How about I, using the mission statement as sort of a starting point, sort of distill that to what I see your duties as, and then also sort of comment on some of the things I could see you doing as actionable items. And then I'll pass that to you, Kelly. And if you guys want to take that up as either a discussion item at the next meeting to parse it out and say whether you agree with it or disagree with it or change it in any way, we can have that discussion at the next meeting. Does that work for you all? If you want me to take that on?
Yeah, sure.
I think that sounds great. And then we can look at it and kind of go, because I always think I like the idea of what's included, and then what do we not do? What are we not responsible for, and what shouldn't we get involved in, right? Because that always helps too, I think.
So the other thing, my other suggestion, Andrew, is that maybe we should funnel our emails to you for distribution to the committee, just to kind of be a little careful, at least up front, about kind of open meeting law stuff.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And now that Kelly is chair, I think, including Kelly as well is fine.
Yeah. So if we just, like, for example, if she and I do something and we send it to you and you distribute it, right? That keeps us kind of in the clear on OML kind of stuff, right?
Yep. But just so you know, as my general rule, even though you probably have seen a fair amount of emails from me, I do try to consolidate my communication because I don't want to bombard you guys with too much stuff. And I'm sure you all have, a million things going on. So yeah, I mean, as long as people don't mind, sending things to me, I can certainly pass them along and or work with Kelly on that. Absolutely. So what I'm hearing as action items are, I will, I'll work on developing some maybe some better distilled sort of duties for the committee and sort of some guardrails, as you put it, Kelly, on what maybe you all can focus on, or and maybe decide that you're not going to do. And then Kelly, you're going to work with Stan on assigning folks different categories to rank, and I think that it sounds like people like Stan's at least starting point on the rankings, or excuse me, on the criteria for the rankings or the scoring system. And so what I can do is I can send that out to the group after the meeting, so you all have this. It can work from the same sheet. And then was there anything else?
Yeah, Jay, we had kind of that storytelling piece, to really, again, kind of getting alignment or understanding the strategic intent and implications of even the goals and the elements of the plan.
Yeah, I would agree that that's another big topic that we need to tackle. Do we talk about it at the next meeting, or do we kind of split up? Because there's the idea of the storytelling, right? There's what are we doing now, and then there's the accomplishments. There's a lot of different ways, different parts of that.
Yeah.
James, do you want to, with your permission, Kelly and Stan, do we want to allow Jay just to give a very, very high level, quick summary, and then we can go into more depth at the next meeting? Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds good. Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, Jay, you're up. Can he hear us?
Still there?
He's there.
Jay, can you hear us?
Uh-oh.
Maybe not.
Oh, shoot.
I don't see him muted either.
Hold on a second.
We start waving at him. He's on video. Hold up a
I
note.
just sent a chat.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. Unfortunately, on these things, you can't, on Google Meet, you can't send a direct chat. You're either talking to everybody or you're talking to nobody.
Wait, text him?
Can I ask a question? Where is the chat option? I don't see one like there is on Zoom.
Yep. So what you'd want to do is in the upper right-hand corner, near where you probably see your own face,
Oh, I
and
see
a small.
around one.
Yep. So then there's a little bubble
it.
there.
I got
yep.
it.
Andrew, should we be using chat though for discussion within the meetings, or just for something like this, we're pinging someone to see if they're paying attention?
Yeah.
And ready to talk?
Yeah, we don't want to use chat too much, just because that can be construed also as a violation of the open meeting law. We want to be kind of open in our communication, but yeah, just little things like getting someone's attention. Yeah, it's not a big deal to do that.
We lost.
Okay.
He dropped. He might have lost his connection.
I guess we lost Jay, but just on the storytelling piece in general, and I don't know if I'm going to say anything reminiscent of what would have been covered, but I'll just say that I'm happy to give that some more thought myself. I think part of it is going to be how the town structures a web presence for the master plan, in terms of how we display some of our accomplishments, or how we display some of the progress that's being made, and also and this was brought up a little bit in discussion at the last meeting, and I don't know if it was a serious comment or not, but I took it seriously, was like the idea, for instance, of like a lawn sign, for instance, when a project's happening, you have some sort of a message out there that says, this is your master plan at work, or something like that. So I think we could work with our town social media coordinator. Her name is Sarah Brush, for those who don't know her. And I can work on, branding something like a hashtag or even a logo that sort of we could incorporate into the web page itself, as well as into any signage or any information that we end up pushing out when we have updates to share. Like if a project's going to happen and a ribbon is going to be cut or something like that, saying this project's happening and, oh, by the way, it is meeting a master plan priority or goal or strategy.
Yeah, because I think having a communication plan, a formal communication plan of who do we need to reach, when do we need to reach those people, and how do we reach them, and when it's, because so much of what we're doing is integral to what everyone had a voice in the master plan. So just being really, here's how we're going to reach out to these people and when. All that goes hand in hand.
So just getting back to the storytelling for a second, sorry, maybe once we get just a broad stroke idea, maybe once we get all of our priorities in order, we bring in the stakeholders themselves. So those who are in charge, and they can tell their story and how they came up with it. And that becomes, okay, so we have this subset of transportation. We have items 1 through 22, and we've given it a value. We listened to their story, the stakeholder, because they're the ones who are going to be most informed, let's say, in terms of how they envision this or why they even put it in the plan. And then we can maybe rejig as necessary or leave it as is. But that might be the answer to the storytelling, is bringing the stakeholders themselves. I think once we've established our system, because we want to get our system, and then, because that's going to, obviously we're 2 meetings in and we're still establishing it, and then go back to the stakeholders and rejig as necessary on those one-offs might be a thought.
That's great. And I see we have Jay back. Jay, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Sorry about that. I don't know where I went.
No worries. We just wanted to give you a quick opportunity to speak to the work that you had done with Stan and Meredith, and just to allow you to contribute to the conversation as well. And in the interest of time, we just wanted you to keep it high level, and we can certainly continue the conversation at the next meeting if there's more we want to get into.
Sure. I'll be brief, Andrew. The reason that I joined this subcommittee was, as Stan pointed out, I saw this list so complicated that how was I ever going to get my arms around 103 items and figure out which one's more important than the other. So when Stan and Meredith and I met a couple times now, we did what all people do, is we sat and told stories to each other. And they were all, shall I say, prioritization stories. The things, you know what you should do, you know what would be the best thing and all that. And, one time I saw this, that, and the other thing. Those kind of stories dominated our conversation. So when Stan looked for a column and values for benefits, I said that sort of, for me, evolved into this.
No.
And he's gone.
Wow, we are just not having good luck with the technology tonight. I'm sorry, guys, and I'm sorry to Jay that he's not able to go into more depth on his part. I don't know. Did you want to, Meredith? Do you want to try to pick up for him, or did you not? I don't know if you have a full breadth of what he was going to try to say, but.
I mean, I feel like, Stan, I don't think I can do Jay justice on his storytelling passion. He had done, I can try to quickly desktop share. Let me see if I can make this work. Are you seeing something?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yay. First time I've done that in Google. So for example, what you see here was what Jay authored as an example of talking about affordable housing. And so what he did was, and this was, again, we were all talking about sharing our perspectives on this. And, we each saw that one topic with a partial and different lens. And so what he did, being very informed on this topic, put together this story as an example of how to tell the story about some of these priorities to ideally, for us to all be aligned on what they mean, to think about the benefits. And of course, again, of equal and greater importance for our town to understand why this 40B thing, why does it matter? And so trying the whole aspect of using a story to tell it and really trying to make it very personal for everyone.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting idea. I think but the bottom line is that we want to be creative in the way that we highlight the accomplishments and the strategies that we're able to to tick off on the master plan. So I think it'd be great if we can incorporate this into that. So I look forward to continued discussion on it. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts.
And I would just say, attending a few planning meetings in the past, this is a very, can be a very controversial topic for parts of the town that may have a proposal in their area. And so again, it's, there's this full picture. I even know by watching this happen out there is I might have even on my silent having my opinion on the matter, had a very different opinion if I had the full picture as what Jay's alluding to here of why we need to do this.
Yep. Yeah, it's to me, it's like the if you think about how the project for Amazon or even the senior center, the way that was crafted to help people understand that it was more than just sort of a building or just sort of the immediate business of the location, how it tied in. I think creating something, a template that has narratives, that's part of the sort of PR campaign, that's not a bad word, but and that we kind of brand this all the way through. So I think this is really as critical as prioritizing, because again, it's how people see it that gets support, because there are a lot of big asks ultimately behind all this, right?
Yeah.
In terms of compromises, money, whatever.
And for example, and it's not part of this plan, but I live right next door to the Royal Crest. And so seeing that PowerPoint proposal, I'm like, well done. Yeah. I live next to it, and there were some things about it that even I didn't realize about its current state. And kind of, it gave a really powerful on the why. And I'm, there's lots, I agree something needs to happen there. But now I understand far better. Oh, it's not just something, it's even more and more critical and with larger implications if nothing happens. So it really helped me as I envisioned something large happening next to me for the next many years. It opened up my mind to it very more, because I thought that's a good story.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm back.
Hey, Jay.
Yes, I'm back. I'm sorry about that. Talk about the best laid plans. But anyway, thank you for addressing this issue. And Meredith, thank you for getting that document up on the screen for me, or whoever did that. Okay, after my brief introduction, does that make sense to you? Did everybody have a chance to read that? The whole idea, as we were talking, was that we all have a story here, and the story that came out of our conversation was this one about control, and that well, we're not in control. So what's the downside of that? And now, shall we read this together, or did you guys already do that while I was? You're all set.
We're good.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess the idea would be, do you have any questions as to the worth of this approach, which allows us to now group things together? Because if we're going to solve the 40B problem, I saw the grouping of land use and housing, number 1 through 19, and transportation, number 31 through 58. And sorting through those with the committees, as you were just discussing, and figuring out which ones apply. And our goal, of course, our benefit, as Stan has in that column, our benefit would be that we would solve the 40B problem and we would gain complete control over our development. And we'd be calling the shots. We'd be designing. We'd be limiting. We'd be enhancing. We'd be asking for the benefits of design from a developer, and we'd be saying, "Here's where we want it to be." But we don't have that ability right now because we're underneath the 10%. So anyway, that's sorry for the confusion about being back and forth here, but that's how I came to this idea of a story, is that we did that. we did that. We told stories to each other, and then it made sense to organize by means of storytelling. And I also think it's a way that we can explain these ideas better to a public who would have trouble, as certainly as I did, at looking at a list of 103 items and saying, "Oh my God, how do we sort these? How do we sort these into some sort of prioritization?" Now, that's only one story, by the way. I saw that as only one story. A second story may be about downtown, right? And the kinds of, shall we say, village squares that maybe we would work pretty well if we spread them around North Andover. Maybe we need to have a town of village squares as opposed to a gigantic downtown. Or maybe downtown is a great place to get more people by means of housing plans, because that's what makes a downtown go, is people. So where are the centers of the people? So this would be the next story we'd tell, would be village centers or downtowns. Where should they be? Should we have more than one?
I personally love the concept of the stories
Yeah.
of tying it together
Yeah.
and making it meaningful. What does this really mean versus one more line on a spreadsheet? Right. This
Right.
this speaks to me personally a lot more, than the individual pieces. I imagine I'm not alone on that. I think these stories would be, not to beat my dead horse here, but would be a huge part of communication plan, right? When do we do these? How do these go out? Who gets these? How do we do it? And I think this is one piece of
Right.
that. And I think it's so important because it makes sense, makes it personal. All of this is so personal to all of us.
I would actually, I'm still on. I would actually frame it not necessarily quote unquote as stories, but establishing context. That's
Right.
That's what you're doing. Is it's so easy to read a line on a spreadsheet, but now you're actually you're showing them the whole picture.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It was a that's a good way of putting it. It's placing a number of these elements in context. They don't all fit here. If we're going to solve the 40B problem, okay, that's just part of the job of the master plan. So we come up with several of these that would serve to help us to organize and order the items in this list. And as I mentioned, I think as Meredith mentioned, and Stan, some of them are low-hanging fruit, might not need much attention at all. Others are really, really difficult issues, like zoning. And if we're going to do this, we have to do something about zoning. And if we don't want to do anything about zoning, well, then maybe we just we have to give up on the 40B control. We have to give up control if we don't want to do anything about zoning. But that's a really difficult topic, because everybody in every neighborhood has their heels dug in.
But I think your point here is that these are ways to get the community understanding the larger, what's happening here, to the priority piece. I think that's great.
Absolutely.
So
And I think that really goes, I think that really
Yeah.
goes to kind of what's our larger mission, right? We're not a one-year group, right? Well, some of us might be, but this is a persistent, at least for this next 18 years of this plan until the next one comes along, committee. So I keep thinking about what's the big pieces in order to make us operational that we need to think about before, then we get down to the tactical, right?
Mhm.
There's certainly it's the stuff we're talking about, right? It's prioritizing the strategies or the goals and how we go about doing that. we've talked a lot of that. I think about the communication plan. I think what I keep calling a communication plan, but the storytelling being part of that. When do we talk to people? Who do we talk? How do we talk to them? How do we get credit, right, for all these good things that we're doing? I see the operating model, kind of what's our purpose, what's our charter. Andrew, you're going to go through and take a stab at that. What are we responsible for? What's our authority and what's not? What other committees do we play with? Who do we not? Where do we not interact? And then I see the other piece is, Meredith, back to your point about the breathing of the master plan. Either it does or it doesn't. And that we say what it is, and just so it's really clear, no, it doesn't breathe at all. This is it. This is how we're operating. Or under these very specific circumstances, here's what we could do or not. So those are kind of the four big pieces that I see as a group we need to wrap our hands around before we kind of, and then, in parallel, work on some of the tactical items of working through things that are already done and all those pieces. Does anyone else see any kind of big components of the committee that we would need to think about in terms of the larger, 5, 10, 15 years, things we want to start putting in place, and how we're going to work and chipping away at this, that we would need to think about?
Kelly, can you reiterate your 4 bullets?
I can try, Stan. Prioritizing the strategies, what we're already looking at. So we have a list to tick and tie and work off of, and everything that goes into that. I said the communication. How we communicate, what do we communicate, who, how. The operating model is what I'm calling it. The purpose. What's in our scope, what's out of our scope as a group. And then the last one, I've been referring it to as change management, but the breathing of the master plan or lack thereof.
Okay.
Those are the 4 I saw. I think.
That makes complete sense.
What else would be those big pieces?
I would just say that your 3rd bullet point, Kelly, just call it operating parameters.
Yep. I was throwing every buzzword out there, no, but not the right one. So thank you.
That's as distinct as we can get.
Yep.
I just sort of as a follow-up to that, Kelly, I wanted to ask Andrew, how do you see this quarterly report working? Do we have to do one of those real soon?
We do. So that was going to be the next agenda item. So good segue, Stan. But so the way I would look at it is, and I just wanted to get everyone's buy-in on this, is the quarter ends obviously at the end of this month. And typically when, for instance, when I manage grants and things like that, and they ask for a quarterly report, they give you a month to get the report in. So I would think that we'd want to be able to get a report to the Board of Selectmen or Select Board by the end of October. So I think, and right now we're on a clip where we're meeting once a month, which I think is fine. So I would basically draft a report, I guess, myself with the cooperation of Jean, and maybe Dan can contribute as well. And we'll get a draft to you, and then you guys can parse it and look at it, and it can be a discussion item if all agree at the next meeting, and you approve it, and then we ship it off to the Select Board. And then when the Select Board review it, I guess we might want to have Kelly or you, Stan, if Kelly's not available, be available at that Select Board meeting just to respond to any questions that the Select Board has. Chris, does that sound like it would satisfy the intent of what the reporting was for the Select Board?
Yeah, I think that it would be great if somebody from the committee could kind of walk through it. I mean, obviously, Andrew, you and Jean and Dan are there, but I think, having a citizen and, not to put our chair immediately on the spot again or vice chair, but someone, I think, presenting this, especially because it's the kickoff of this, I think would be good. I believe our second meeting in October is the 19th. If that's a little swift, our first meeting in November would be like oh my goodness. I think the night before the election, if anybody can sleep. But that, as you lay it out, Andrew, that would be fine. I think that'd work great.
Okay, and I mean, when I think of getting it in, you know, within a month after the end of a quarter, I'm thinking that's on, like, that's when we submit it to you. As to
Right,
when you actually, as a board, take it up, it might be in November, let's say,
Right.
or later than that even. But I'm just giving us our own timeline as far as when we get it done and get it to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if you can get it done in October, as I said, our first meeting is pretty early in November, and then there's one before Thanksgiving. That seems like a long way away, but it moves really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I would rather this group have, you know, as much fleshed out in these first couple of meetings as possible, as opposed to just sort of, you know, rolling in and just saying, hey, we're still getting organized. So as much as that we can kind of put behind the first one, I think gives us good momentum and kickoff would be my sentiment.
Okay, and I can draft something that maybe will serve
Yeah.
as a template moving forward, that you all
Okay.
can take a look at the next meeting.
Great. Great.
All right. So we've covered a fair amount of territory. Kelly, do you
Yeah.
have anything else we want to discuss?
No, I mean, I guess it would be great maybe at the next meeting if we could talk about kind of those 4 items that I mentioned. You know, is there
Mhm.
anything else? Right? What are those big picture items? And then we decide which. There's a lot of work here, and we can all talk about a lot of things. Which ones do we want to start focusing on? You know, more
Right,
than just the prioritizing in the strategy, but with all these different chunks, where do we spend our time to make sure that we're operating? We're a new group, right? We're a new committee, so this is very different, at least from my experience on some of the other ones, so that we know where we're focused.
So just one other
Yeah.
thing, and this is for Kelly's edification more so than anything else. It's just I'll confer with you, and you can sign off on the agenda, obviously, as the chair, before we distribute that for the next meeting. So you and I can sort of strategize, and Jean, before we distribute any new agenda, so we're all on the same page as how we're going to conduct the meeting. And then the other thing is, and this goes towards what we opened our meeting with, as far as all the strategies that may or may not have been completed or had some level of progress made with them. I encourage everyone to take a look at that, and we may want to think about how we want to define what strategies have been accomplished or have not been accomplished. You know, what if we want to use the green and orange, if we don't want to use the green and orange, if we want to use green, what does that mean? That might be another piece of this, Kelly. I don't know if you agree. And I mean, certainly with respect to the update to the Board of Selectmen, if we want to be able to concretely say, here's some, we've been starting to take stock of which strategies have been accomplished, and here they are. You know, we obviously all want to agree as a committee that they, in fact, that people, agree that they have been accomplished.
Yeah, that they're done. Right.
Yeah.
So just something to think about.
Agreed.
But I think this is going to take a while to really get our feet under us on a lot of this. It's just so much, right? So I don't think I think we've done a fantastic amount of work in a short period of time, and at least analysis wise, and we'll just continue to do that. And I promise everyone, this will come together, as we continue to move forward. We'll see concrete results of this as we continue to move forward. I assure everyone.
Okay. Well, thanks for all your hard work, Andrew.
Hashtag
You-
MIT.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone for your work as well. I think everyone's come up with some great discussion, and obviously the subcommittee this week with Meredith, Stan, and Jay, they did great work. So I really appreciate, and I appreciate the Kelly and Stan, you guys stepping up to lead the group as well. So thank you to everybody as well.
Great.
Not a problem. And we will find somebody to take minutes next time. We promise.
All right, sounds good. Okay, before we get out of here, I just want to quickly say, I'm just looking at the calendar. Are we good to go for Thursday next month?
Which
That would be the 22nd at 5 p.m. Does that work for folks?
let me see.
Sure.
Here's where Assuming we're still remote, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see an issue.
Yes. Okay.
looks good.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay,
Thank you,
so,
Andrew.
yeah, no problem. We'll do that. And then, the most important part of the meeting, if I can just get a
Move.
motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, right? Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second,
All right.
Okay, and then I'll do a quick roll call. Sorry, this is the way we have to do it remotely. So Kelly,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
John,
yep.
Dan,
Yes.
Meredith,
Yes.
Holly,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
and Chris.
Yes.
All right, we got a unanimous. Thank you, everybody.